Okay, now we can talk. I like how you switched that to be like the clapping. Like now you're taking your you're like, no, the clapping's not right. It's like after we recorded for 20 minutes.
When we go really slow, it's like
I understand. But I like how you're trying to make me be like, like I'm fucking up.
You didn't fuck up at all.
Nobody fucked up. So why don't you tell everybody what just happened as we start this episode?
Hey, friends. Hello, friends. And welcome to Creative Risk, where we talk about art, entrepreneurialism, and everything in between. My name is Joshua Morgan. This is Mike Labbadia.
Yes. Why don't you tell everybody what happened? Tell everybody what just happened.
We've been recording this episode for the last 20 minutes, and my microphone wasn't on. But isn't that funny that I was like, let me click the software while we're recording just to see? Could you imagine if we recorded the whole thing?
I could imagine that. Yeah, I could.
Oh, my God.
This is good. Well, this is good. So, hey, we're back. Great.
Hey, we're back. We're here for the first time for all of you. For us, it's been a minute.
And I'm going to, start completely fresh. Here we go. Fresh.
Well, yes.
So what's
today? What if we were like, let's just pick back up where we done, and ignoring completely.
Yeah.
We don't care about any of you listeners.
But when we talk
just
about comfort food performances and other things, It's like I'm not going to pretend like we didn't already talk about it. Well, I'm not going to act. I'm not going to fucking act. Okay. I'm not going to be a fucking actor. No. So what are we talking about today, Joshua?
Well, Michael James, correct?
No.
Oh, that's Michael James Calciano. My boyfriend's Michael James.
Yes,
What's your middle name?
You have a boyfriend. You live in sin. We get it.
What's your middle name? John.
Joseph.
John, Joseph. They're all the same. So listen, what we're talking about today is probably most of our least favorite topic, if for no other reason than it just brings up a shit ton of anxiety and fear, and that's money. But before we get into money, we want to do our comfort food performances. And even though we just did this, I'm picking a different one.
Good, do it. And we'll add and by the way, there's twangy music playing right now. When we introduce the segment, I have twangy music playing.
Oh, okay. Okay, great.
So
great.
So
I hope you're enjoying that. I'm going to start this time.
Great.
And I'm going to think about one. So
you started last time too.
Yeah. Did I?
Yeah.
Well, I said Ian Shaw's performance in The Shark is Broken, which I'm going to stick with, but I'm going to give you a different one now.
Give me a different one.
Performance. Okay. Ellen Burstyn in Requiem for a Dream.
I've never seen that movie. I know, isn't that? I know. I'm like a cishet. I'm a cishet man who's never seen it. Can you believe it?
Is that like a cishet? Is that a cishet movie? Is that like
I feel like it is
man movie?
I feel like it is kind of like a cishet movie. It's like a very auteur. Who directed it?
Okay.
Darren Aronofsky directed it.
Right.
We all know he's fat phobic because he made The Whale, so it's like...
God, don't even get me started. Requiem for a Dream and Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind are two movies that I feel like I've seen 98,000 times.
That's good.
And Ellen Burstyn in particular.
She's so good.
Oh my gosh. I mean, I'm getting goosebumps. My grandmother was I was very, very close. Both my grandmothers, but especially my great-grandmother when I was growing up. And Ellen Burstyn just sort of aging and having this second dream of being on that TV show and losing. It's just incredible.
Right.
And she's so good, and also perpetually 92. I feel like she's been 92 for the last 40 years. But anyway, that's my performance that I love. Ellen Burstyn, Requiem for a Dream. What's yours?
Well, I probably realized too, I should probably record this on Zoom. We're gonna keep this all. I'm recording it to the cloud, just in case.
Oh yes,
yes.
Yes.
Okay, that's great. First off, she's great. You know what I'm gonna take? I'm gonna take an Ellen Burstyn. Was it Bernstein?
Don't
it's
even know her
Bernstein
name.
Bears.
You're like, I'm gonna pick Leonard Bernstein.
I'm gonna take Bernstein Bears as well. So in high school, me and my buddy Mike Topalis, there was a summer where we were both janitors. And, so I was a custodian. I was a custodian every summer for like 6 years. But every day he would come over my house and we would get fucking ripped. We would just get we just get fucked up.
On heroin.
And we would watch The Exorcist. We watched it one summer. We watched it every single day for like 3 months. And we watched it and we would pause it. We'd like, most people treat sports games like we'd pause it and be like we'd go up to the screen and like point out things. Like, dude, there was a summer. Have you ever seen it?
Of course.
And they're coming out with a sequel too.
They haven't
or not
already?
a sequel. Oh no, they came out with a few, but they're rebooting it. David Gordon Green's rebooting it. But that fucking movie, man, talk about. We used to like act it out, and we used to like talk about like there was. Oh man, that's a movie that I remember the very first time I saw like a clip of that movie. Like I was going into my mom's room, but my mom just kind of had it casually playing while she was like doing something. I know. We were talking about Passion of the Christ when the pre-record, before this.
In episode whatever this is going to be. Part
this is episode 3. But yeah, and I remember I saw like it was the part where she's like going on the bed and her eyes roll back in her head. It was on cable, and it was a cable version of it. And I remember I ran out of the room. And yeah, I just got that movie, Max von Sydow, so good. I mean, Ellen B. Great.
Ellen Bernstein Bear.
She's in the reboot too. She's in the reboot.
Is she really?
Yep.
Cool.
As is Leslie Odom Jr. You're like, shut up. Okay.
No. Actually, what I was thinking about was we watched Legend of Sleepy Hollow last night, which is a great cast.
With Johnny Depp?
With Johnny Depp.
That's a fucking good movie. That's a great movie.
It is. I had never seen it before.
Yeah.
And it's a good movie. And I was just thinking about how good Tim Burton is. And when you said good. David Gordon Green, I'm like, I mean, sure, I'm great, whatever. But I was thinking about how I would love to see Johnny Depp's. I'd love to see Johnny Depp's Exorcist. No, I would love to see The Exorcism of Johnny Depp. That's a good name for a movie, by the way.
Poops in the bed.
I'd love to see. We've been watching that trial on Netflix too.
Oh, really?
But yeah. But no,
listen,
I would love to see
Tim
Tim Burton
in my bed any day. You know what I mean?
Seriously.
She could poop on my chest.
Listen,
no.
I have some stories from when I was younger when I had to learn the hard way about how to avoid that, by the way. But that's a story for another time.
Listen, I want that. No, but the Patreon, whenever that comes out. No, but the Patreon is just you talking about like your like
Josh was bottoming stories. We can't include that. Cut that.
No, absolutely. Come on.
No, but I'll tell you, if you watch that every summer, I'll tell you this is so basic. It just so reveals the difference between us. But at the same time, I was that age. I was watching truly. Sometimes I would swap them in and out every day. Lucille Ball and B. Arthur Mame, the musical, with interest, and sometimes swapped out with Robert Preston and Shirley Jones as the Music Man. Those were my two movies that I watched over and over and over again.
That's great.
But we'll save that. We'll save those performances for next time. Or if this doesn't record and we have to record this episode again then we'll do that then. So those are good. So listen, while I do not have hard and fast like numbers about this because I don't think anyone's ever done this poll, and what's a trusted pollster? Isn't like quantum.
None of them are.
Pollsters,
come on,
whatever.
These polls are fucking fake.
Let's not talk politics. We're just talking polls in general, statistical polls. That I really do believe that the number one reason most artists end up quitting the business, actors in particular, is because of money or the lack thereof. It's the number one reason.
Yeah, I do agree with that. Yeah, I mean I do agree with that. I think that it's it wears on you. It stops getting cute. Oh, it's not cute anymore.
Yeah, it was cute when you were 26.
Exactly.
And like, oh, I'm in between gigs, and
right.
Oh gosh, I don't know. Maybe, and then it's been 18 months. It's cute then. It's not cute when you're 35. And
it's been a month since I've worked. It's not cute.
But I think where we should kick off talking about this is by talking about some of the reasons why this is so particularly painful for us as artists. And I think probably the biggest one is, look, we live in a capitalistic culture, and that where money is some measure of success, quote unquote. And I bring that up, I say that at the outset, because you and we went to the same school. I went in 1974, you went in 2012, or whatever the hell you went. We went to the same school where I remember Robert Bassett, who was our associate dean, once described it to me as a trade school. So just like plumbers, we're going to go out and we're going to start to get our plumbing jobs. And here's the thing. We come out, we want to be actors, but more often than not, we're not actually making money from our art. That's painful. It's painful. Because then we're pushed into, obviously, other jobs. And for most people, I bring up the capitalism thing, because if you're making your money as a bartender or waiting tables or whatever it is, well, to the rest of society, that's what you do. And that's not fun, to be perceived as a non-artist when you know at your core, this is what you want to do.
I think that's well put. I think that, it's emotionally taxing as somebody who has, had all types of survival gig jobs. It's difficult when, you're like, this is to do something for hours a week, 30 hours a week, 20 hours a week, 40 hours a week, 50 hours a week, whatever it ends up being, that you don't care about. And that's something you don't want to do, and that is very emotionally exhausting. And, we'll talk more about secondary income later, but yeah, I mean, it's hard. It's hard to, and yes, and it is kind of, per your point, that's what you do in the eyes of society, and so that's
right.
That's hard. Yeah.
And so then on the flip side of that, but somewhat related, when you lean in to your art, I'll let you share what you want to share, but you're on this gig now that you're not doing for the money, because the truth is that when we prioritize, making art, a lot of times we're not making as much money. So it's kind of it's the flip side of the same idea of, so then when we try to do the thing that we love to do, that could also, further the rest of our career, we're not making money. And again, in this moment when you're like, I just want to go get a coffee, and you're like, but I guess I have to make it at home. It's not a good feeling.
Yeah.
It makes you feel like shit.
Well, yeah, and it's hard that when you give a lot of time, energy, blood, sweat, and tears towards something that you're, not being paid for. And, it's like there's this weird thing, which, somebody will have to explain it to me one day. But it's like, this idea that you should be paid to audition and paid to pitch. And it's like, it's like you don't get paid to do a job interview. Like that's, I think that certainly people can abuse it, and, but there's protections in place for that. But, what's hard is it's hard when what does it do to somebody emotionally when they, maybe take work off for 3 weeks to shoot a short and potentially go into debt, and they come out of that experience, in debt, broke, freaking out. What does that do to you? It sends a message that it's
exactly.
When I prioritize my art, it means that I'm going to lose money, number one. And it's also we were talking about this in the previous recording, but it's like, what's hard about capitalism, and despite anybody, you and I are both, we're both capitalist swine. But, what is hard about capitalism is that, it's not about what you want or what you think. It's about what the market thinks. And so what's the message you get when you do prioritize your art? And it's not like, oh, people are lining up to give you money. It sends the idea that it's like, hey, your art's not, your whatever you're making is not quotes for the people who are listening, quotation marks, valid or worthwhile in the eyes of, an audience. And that can wear on you emotionally, let alone, we're not, of course, getting into the quite literal financial repercussions paying your bills, but just emotionally.
And you sort of were saying this too, I often say, I think you say a version of it too, that, we're in the business of losing our jobs. We just lose our jobs over and over and over and over and over and over and over again. Meaning that even if you are someone who's financially responsible, you have some good practices in place, the truth is that we're just inherently in an unstable business. Our jobs can last anywhere from 3 days to 3 years, but there's an inevitable end. Right. And so it's already unstable. And therefore, let's just take like an example of the long term. Again, why is this such a sore spot for us? It's almost near impossible sometimes to feel like you can make movement in terms of savings or certainly have retirement. Mike, only because I know she's not going to listen to it. Because it's been a long time since I worked with this woman. I remember I worked with the woman. She was 57 years old. This is years ago now. And when we got to the financial piece of our work, it turns out that she had zero savings, $0 in savings, 2 kids, one of whom was special needs, and a credit score that was below 500, and no retirement. I mean, it's actually kind of it's wild, and it makes me a little emotional when I think about it, because she kept going, and she's still performing today.
God bless her.
But that's a real sacrifice, and I think for most people too. I actually think what you're kind of hitting on too is you get to this point where you're like, well, do I want to be a person and have a life? Do I want to raise a family sometimes? Am I forced into this situation where am I going to continue to do this thing that I love and that I so identify with? Or am I going to sort of succumb to the waves of my creative lifestyle,
right,
that often dashes me against the brutal rocks of reality? That's good. That's good. I might use that because that's actually a pretty good comparison.
Yeah, go ahead. I like that.
You know what I mean, though?
Well, I think what's interesting about the losing our jobs piece too is that like it's further proof that we are not employees. This was a big realization with our work. Is like, we keep looking at ourselves like we're employees, and it's like, no, just like a restaurant can't guarantee, or Nike or any business never coasts. You're never. Whereas if you get a cushy desk job, absolutely you could get laid off, you could get fired if you don't do your work. But like, right, if you do your job, you can expect to stay on, right? Whereas that is not the case for us. We should be looking at ourselves more like small businesses, where it's like every day. It's not so much to me that like we lose our jobs. I'm starting to rethink this a little bit. We are in the business of losing our jobs, and I do like that. That's catchy, but it's also like, we're in the business of losing business, and we're in the business of keeping business. Like, and that's what it's about. Because just like when that customer comes in, if I'm a restaurant, customer comes in, eats their food, and leaves. That's it. They're done, and there's no guarantee they're going to come back tomorrow. It's like you have to work every day to maintain business. And
absolutely,
this is a key differentiation, is we keep thinking of ourselves like we're employees to some large, the business is our employer. It's like, what? It's like, no, that's not really how it works. And in relation to, what you're talking about is how, God, is it challenging to build a foundation, a financial foundation, when every day you're fighting to survive
your life. It's so true. And if I may, just going back to that point though about like living life, we've talked about this. sometimes like it just gets old, right? Always having to watch your pennies. Sometimes you do just want to be able to go do the things that other people are doing. Go to a restaurant, go see a show freely, buy new shoes without being worried. So when you start to stop enjoying life, essentially, because you're constantly in this state of feast more often famine, right? That gets old for some people. And I would argue, because I hear this, people will date people, right? I work with artists all the time who are dating people who don't get it. And
like
whether
what?
it's trying
Like
to build
what is like in what respect?
It's kind of like what we were saying. It's one thing when you're like 24, 25. But if you're like a 32-year-old guy and you're going out with someone, it's getting serious, right? And, they're like, oh, let's go to the Poconos for the weekend. But you
literally
live
telling
a life.
my story.
What? Is it your story?
You're literally telling my story. You're like, yeah, you're like 32 and like,
well, no,
maybe finally somebody wants to touch you. No.
Well, that's not your story. That's not gonna happen. No. But I'm serious that like that I think there's. But it's not. Listen, I was out seeing my family the other day. My aunt says to me, because I was like, oh, because even though this is our job, I'm in between acting gigs. I just booked a gig, but I haven't worked in 5-6 months. Right? So in the in-between time, you sort of watch a little more. And my aunt made a comment about, I said something about that. My aunt made a comment about, well, you like to cook. What if you cooked for people on the side? As we know, Mike, artist strategy is a full-time job unto itself, let alone, the full-time job of continuing to build our creative careers. But I say that because what I wanted to say was, what the fuck are you talking about? Cook? What about? Oh yeah, let me go become a private chef. I mean, it was just ludicrous, but also offensive, and it kind of speaks to this idea that a lot of people don't get it, right? Like they don't see what it is. You know what I'm talking about?
Well, I think it's interesting. Here's why, especially in older. I think with our generation, it might be a little different, but like older generations, a call, which by the way, people have different callings. And so your aunt is probably like, you need more money, so do something else. That's what it's about. Your aunt probably has a bunch of other things. Maybe her calling is her family. Maybe her calling is her book club. Maybe her calling is charity work. I don't know what her calling is. But to her, probably what she pursued for a career, potentially, if she had one, was not her calling, was not what she was passionate about.
She was a prostitute, actually.
Are you serious? Could you imagine? You can't
so
say.
It was her calling.
By the way, it's, yeah.
No, but I hear you. I do hear you.
And so, but it's hard but now I feel like most people our generation are more into the idea of like pursuing what you really care about and shit, and potentially, but no, it's hard to look at, last thing I'll say is, listen, I am 31 years old, soon to be 32, and it's like, it's difficult to be with, I was with two friends of ours, and we were out to dinner, and they both come from money, and make a lot of money, and they were talking about like, oh yeah, I'm gonna buy a house here, blah, 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 and they were just, and I was like, ooh, okay, you know what I mean? Just like listening to them talking about buying, a house, and it's like it's difficult for me to be, Yeah.
Remind me. No, because I want to come back to this point about in Jim Carrey. Just remind me about that in a second, okay?
Okay. Yeah, sure.
Because I do. because you're talking about something. This is sort of bringing up another big piece here, which, by the way, Mike, is very much my story that I'm still trying to work through because it's very frustrating for me, and it's where a lot of our work has, elements of our work have come from, which is that we have to figure this out ourselves, and most people don't understand how to do that. That 57-year-old woman at the time didn't understand. she didn't have any guidance, and there isn't a lot of for what we do, the unique structure of what we do. There isn't a lot of clarity around how to make it work in a lot of ways.
And even more so, in addition to, first off, just a lack of financial knowledge, it's like, which everybody's always, it's like, oh, like we didn't learn about taxes. We didn't learn about all these things in school. So just a lack of financial awareness. I think the biggest problem, in my opinion, is that we're using financial principles that are not relevant to us as our baseline. So artists are not, artists and entrepreneurs, which I think are very much similar. It's a very similar path of, I'm reading something right now. This guy who's a major, has like 7 6-figure business, 7-figure, 8-figure businesses. And, he ran a supplement store in Missouri and slept on a couch in the back, it's like for years and didn't make any money. It's like it's entrepreneurs and artists. We have a different financial model than people who have 9-to-5 jobs. And we're using people who have 9-to-5 jobs as our basis of financial health. Here's what you're supposed to do. When you're supposed to do this, you're supposed to do that, you're supposed to do this, but we don't have employers. We don't have consistent employers who are paying into a 401k. We don't have a guaranteed paycheck next week. So it is not, so I think part of what you're talking about, until we have to figure it out ourselves, is that we need to stop looking. It's like an apple looking at an orange and saying like, oh, I got to be more like that. It's like, it's completely different models. It's completely different economic models. And so I think part of it, there's a lot of shame because we potentially are looking at people who have jobs, work for corporations or, work for, whatever, who are able to do things with their money. And we're using them as our basis.
Well, it sort of brings us to this. We're sort of talking about this anyway, but sort of this final point about why this is such a sore point, which is it just brings up so much shame. And this is what I was going to say. I cut you off before, so apologies about that. But what I was thinking about the Jim Carrey thing, because Jim Carrey, and I have to listen to them because I was listening to a podcast or a NPR episode where I forget the actor's name, but Jim Carrey talks a lot about ego and how it fucks us all up.
It's just him and Kevin Spacey. And could you imagine if it was just like somebody so like despicable? It's like Jim Carrey, Kevin Spacey in conversation,
in discussion, about ego.
Yeah,
no. Jim Carrey talks a lot about this, about how like and I'm saying this because to your point about comparison. If we compare and then we have all this fear and shame as though we're somehow failing, when hey, it's ludicrous, which is the point you're trying to make, which is for us to think that we can compare ourselves to our buddies who might work in corporate America when the structure of our business is not only entirely different, but as we often argue, non-existent, which is why we've got to do it ourselves.
Right.
And so that our ego naturally flares up. We look around, oh, I'm failing. And then, of course, what that does with a lot of artists is rather than then the two options seem to be sometimes, well, I quit and I go do something else. Or if they do tend to be an artist, a lot of times they just ignore. They ignore all the problems. Right. Let me not look. Let me just keep going. And before you know it, they're either forced out, right? Or there's a real come to Jesus at some point.
Well, look, it's
Mel Gibson.
Yeah. There's a real Mel Gibson moment where you get pulled over for drunk driving and start talking about, the cabal. Don't do that. But, the thing that comes up to me, and this kind of segues into this next thing, which is what is our core principles when it comes to financial management? The other reason why people ignore, and I'll speak for myself, that's my default. Like, I know I'm going to do this forever, and I there's no way. Listen, I have a lot of things I want in life. I want a family. I want a home. I want all of those things, and I'm working to make those things happen. But my default is, so I don't see myself quitting and doing something else anytime soon. But the problem is my default is to ignore the money, is to ignore it and to hide. Why? Because just like everything, it is difficult because it is difficult. It is difficult to look at it and feel the pressure. And that is what business is built on. Business is built on pressure. There needs to be, because when you say, shit, I need to make more money this month, that pressure is, going to, if you have the right mindset, if you have the right sort of tools, systems to deal with it, like that can lead to actually great things, phenomenal things, important things. But it's listen, it's hard to feel pressure. And that's why the first thing that is kind of our core principle, and this was I remember when you and I really, because I think it's important to talk about this briefly, why I realized that this is the top financial principle for us. Because I remember we were having an argument about debt, actually. I think it was. Or maybe it was about missing, the fact that we kind of missed buckets a little bit.
When we save. We'll talk about that in a little bit.
Yeah, so we were talking, and, again, I was talking about, this doesn't make sense for X, Y, and Z reasons, and it'd be more smart to do this, And I realized that why we were having a disagreement on this is because I think your whole life, especially, you have prioritized creative and financial freedom above everything else. That's more than security, even more than security. Creative and financial freedom are the two most important things that sort of affect, that then waterfall throughout our entire financial management system. What does creative and financial freedom mean to you?
Well, first, because I think it's important to clarify, they're synonymous and very different at the same time, right? So for me, for example, in a nutshell, eye on the prize. So part of what that means is that, I mean, you know this, I've never had a normal job, quote unquote. I don't have a regular old resume. I don't have a resume that I have ever submitted to anybody for consideration for supervisor job X, Y, or Z. I've never had it. And
you've never done gig work. I think you catered one shift in your life at one time when you were very young, but you've never done gig work either. You've never waited tables, never babysat, never temp work, never any of that.
And that's what prioritizing creative and financial freedom are to me, because you know this about me, but I do believe entrepreneurialism is the pathway to financial freedom. I do believe that. I believe that's also what a capitalistic structure is built on. I believe that's what America is built on. I do believe that if I take responsibility for my output, as a contribution to that, as both an artist and whatever my secondary income stream is, artist strategy, then that is going to take me to the place. So ultimately, Mike, what that means is that not giving anybody else control over my time and the future of my financial intake. And that's ultimately what that means to me. A larger topic, but that's in a nutshell. What is it for you?
Yeah, no, I think, first off, I'll give you little examples. There have been times even in structuring our business where we've been talking about ways we could potentially upgrade this or make more money here or make more money there. And you're like, and for you, it's about having the baseline. But you were like, I just want to work when I want to work. That's most important to me, is that I want to be able to work when I want to work. And I think that, the reason why creative and financial freedom is, creative freedom to me means you have the ability to say yes to for instance, I can come out here and do this job, which does not pay very much, because I have a baseline income with artist strategy that I can maintain, right? So I can say yes to jobs and not worry about money, right? I can also say no to jobs that I don't want to take. I can say no to jobs. We always talk about selling out. I don't want to sell out. I don't want to sell. Well, if you have, creative freedom is being able to say no to jobs as well. And financial freedom, I think you're right. Financial freedom means a couple of things. I do think it means, probably earning 7 figures, getting to that point so that you can build a sizable enough nest egg where when you retire, you have something you don't have to worry about making money. That's one thing that financial freedom is. So it's just to be clear, it's making a fuck ton of money. That's one element of it. You have to make a fuck ton of money. But the other piece of it too is that you have control, per your point, over how much you make. And that means that you can't work for somebody else. The only way that you have control over how much you can make is if you work for yourself, because there's always going to be a cap if you work for somebody else. And so but there's major consequences. I just want to be clear. There are major consequences to prioritizing above all things creative and financial freedom. The first consequence is security, at least in the short term. In the short term, you will probably not be putting aside as much money for retirement. You may not. It may take longer for you to build savings because you're going to be using money to invest in yourself and your business, acting and otherwise, to grow it, right? So you do sacrifice to an extent, security. Of course, the other consequence is look, you could fail. Like, if you cannot, there are things that are outside of our control. And, listen, there are businesses that people try to get going for 30 years and they never make their money. They never.
Well, look, you're actually bringing up, and I'm going to get this exact wording right. You're sort of talking about the other key point here, which I actually think is really important to discuss in relation to our base, because it's so wrapped up in money and that there's inherent risk, right? So the actual definition of being an entrepreneur, right, is a person who organizes and operates a business or businesses taking on greater than normal financial risks in order to do so. So even forget the word financial for a second, per your point. This is, and your point about not being an employee. We want to be an artist. Our work is mainly centered around actors, but it doesn't matter. You want to paint, you want to dance, you want to make movies, you are an entrepreneur, and that is inherently risky. You might fail. The same way Joe starting the pencil business down the street might fail.
We know
there are risks involved.
We know somebody mutually who will remain nameless in their 70s, I believe, who said only 5 years ago or something like 10 years ago did they start really making money. And they've been an entrepreneur their whole lives and lived off of debt, credit cards, and is now making millions and millions of dollars. But, that is the name of if we want to get paid for our passion, the thing is you need to carve. This is capitalism again. You need to carve your spot in the market. You need to carve your niche in the market.
And while that means a lot of things from a financial perspective, because that's what this episode is, you have to invest. You have to spend money to make money. And this is, but listen, let's talk about why that's difficult for artists, because artists, it's what we were just talking about, even with my aunt and me making the comment, I'm watching my dollars right now. We're very wary of parting with our money because it comes and goes, and it just comes and goes and comes and goes. But in order to take that risk in the first place, you have to take the risk of being willing to invest. And I just have to say, Mike, that whoever's listening to this, if you are someone who is risk averse, if you are someone who struggles with the idea of investing in your business. I'm not saying just change, but you really have to do a deep dive into your willingness to continue to grow this business, because what is your expectation? If you are expecting yourself to be plucked up from obscurity and become a big star, I mean, LOL, it's not gonna, it's the likelihood of that happening is slim to none without your willingness to put in this risk. And I just want to say, sorry, not to be tangential, but while we were recording this episode, I got an email. I'm looking at emails, like doing work.
LOL.
No, but it relates to this. This person said, I'm going to change some of the wording. Just this one sentence. Honestly, ever since working with you guys, I've had to do some real evaluating of myself in this career. And that, to me, is a win. Because when we're talking about this idea of risk,
right?
This is a real, we have to go. Am I willing? Am I equipped? And I don't mean equipped cash-wise, because I grew up with no money. Am I equipped to live in a place of high risk so that I might not make my money until I'm 70-something? But along the way, I'm continuing to engage with my art, the thing that I say means more to me. And, maybe another episode we'll talk about understanding your why, right? Because that's a big part of this. But just to underline that point about what that means to take financial
and not resting on your laurel. I mean, look, it was interesting about the Billy Porter house thing. Billy Porter was like, I lost my house because of the strike. Billy Porter is, verging on, I don't know if he's like a star, but like, verging on star. But he wasn't even at the point where he was making like fuck you money. And I say that because it's like, smart business people understand they need to always be growing. They need to be scaling and growing. Like that's why celebrities build secondary incomes. It's so that they can make sure they understand they need to put that, as opposed to hoarding the money because I don't know when the next job is coming, which is very common, right? You hoard the money and hold it close. Yep. You understand, no, let me grow it. Let me grow so I can continue to bring in more, right? And so, yes, the only way that you can, and the only way, if we're talking about being rich, 6 to 7 figures, that is, you have to grow something with your acting career and with your secondary, like a life in the regions is not going to do it, right? It's like, it's just not going to do it. It's not going to cut the mustard. And so how are we growing something that will pay us those dividends?
And along the way, just because we're sort of starting this about, what are some of our core principles are, and you spoke a little bit to this as well, but we have to have a super close relationship with our money. And I just want to say, it's funny because I think, along over the years, Mike's perspective of my perspective has seemingly been more, risk prone, which per my point obviously is. And yet I'm a big believer in taking a super conservative approach to making sure that you have a really tight relationship with what's going on with your financials in order to basically also cushion those risks. So we're going to talk more about that in a little bit. But actually, this sort of brings us to probably our maybe most controversial, I would argue, core principle when it comes to financial management for an artist. And that is the need to grow a secondary income, which look. I just want to set this up for a second. No one disagrees with that. No one disagrees with the idea that there's a likely need for most artists to need to consider a secondary income stream. I think what's different, and what Mike and I have had some pretty intense conversations about over the years, has been an artist not only considering, but putting a ton of time and energy into the development of a secondary income stream that is essentially, and let's be clear, because we also somewhat changed the verbiage to this internally, really more likely a primary income stream, but a secondary focus. So why don't you start this off?
Well, yeah.
By speaking to even some of your, I don't know, concerns.
Well, I think here are the major concerns, right? The first is, with secondary income in general, even though I feel like most people in their heart of hearts know it is smart to have it, is number one is I just want to focus on my acting career. I don't want to have to focus. And in fact, what I like, and let's all kind of talk top level about it all right now, why my waiting job is good, why my serving job is good, why my babysitting job is good, is because it's mindless, or I don't have to invest a lot of time and energy into it. And so that way, when I am not doing it, I can really focus on my acting career. Whereas, just to be clear, when we talk about secondary income, what you and I are speaking about is building something, probably a venture, a business venture of some kind, that pays you. So a business venture. And listen, the qualms with that are, wait, that's building a business. That's hours and hours and hours, 40, 20, 30, 50 hours a week going towards building this business. And that is not time that is spent. I would rather just go do a 6-hour shift, come home, and then do my acting shit. Here's the problem with that, in my experience, as somebody who for the first 7 years out of school had all types of those jobs and was one of the people who would say that. Number one is we talk about this in depth and, sort of our curriculum and course, but it actually makes you more complacent. It makes you more complacent in life because you are spending hours a week doing something you don't give a shit about. So it kills your spirit a little bit. And it's never that easy. I have catered. I have done all types of shit. It is never that easy to go. It's never truly mindless. There's always emotional elements. There's travel. There's late nights, physical labor. You're exhausted. There are things, and it makes you, and the big thing too is that you can't grow that alongside of an acting career. If you are going to always need other income streams, why not have something that you can grow alongside of your career, right? That's the point, is have, yeah, please.
Well, this is, but it's funny because you've brought this up several times too, posed the question, what if I put all that time into my acting career as opposed to grow? Because let's be clear. You're sort of saying it, but to grow another business, and we believe secondary income needs to meet 5 key criteria. Obviously needs to be mobile. It needs to give you flexibility of schedule. You need to be able to have some earning income adaptability, i.e., if you need to make more money, you can. It needs to be scalable, and it needs to be something you're passionate about. And those things are not easy. That does not a one-off nanny gig make. And so if you're going to put a ton of time, and it would be a ton of time, and
nobody's pretending it's not going to be, exactly. Let's not pretend it's going to be passive and unless you're filthy rich and you can build a passive income stream right now, it's not.
Which some people can do. Most people cannot. But and there's its own risk, by the way. Double the risk, right? We're talking about risk. Now you're doing double the risk, double the investment. Fuck my life. We're going to talk about that. But the question is, well, what if I spent all that time growing an acting career? Well, here's a couple of things about my argument about this. Our argument. But for me, sure. The dream scenario is I've got my nanny gig, but 90% of the time I'm working as an actor. I'm going from this Broadway show to that TV thing. Oh, I'm going to shoot a little movie over the summer. Then I'm going to have 6 weeks off and I'll rest before I start up my gig off Broadway. And then yes, of course, absolutely beautiful. And I hope it works out that way. And listen, there have been many years in my life, God, when I think about it, where I've worked pretty much nonstop for maybe years in a row. But you know what? It always comes to an end. And not only does it always come to an end, at time of recording this, Mike, I think I said this to you the other day. I have, this is a blessing unto itself, and I realize that, but I've never gone more than probably 3 months without booking something, And this is this period of my life where I haven't worked, so it's been February, March, April, May, June. Yeah, it's been about 7 months.
Strike. Well, the strike is going on. I mean, look,
absolutely.
COVID,
okay.
The strike, COVID, the strike. There's always, it's very,
So to go to this question, what if that time was spent in my acting career? Absolutely. Absolutely heard. But again, when I look down the thing for me, it's funny, and I think you and I might even have different goals here. Right. For me, it's not so much about growing wealth, massive wealth, month of my secondary income stream. It's about the ability to create more stability.
Yes.
Month to month, week to week, in terms of what I can expect. So if Artist Strategy is able to provide us with a baseline stipend, right? That then we can have some adaptability potential on top of that. That at least I can plan. I can contribute to my retirement. I'm better prepared for the long term so that I don't have to be 53 going, can I take care of my family over the course of the next 6 months while I wait for someone else to decide whether or not, I should make money.
And look, here's what I won't argue. What I won't argue is I think probably net hours when I actually don't think this is true. Probably net hours I spend the same. Well, that's the thing is I'm working way more, than I was when I was, and I don't think that's a surprise.
As an actor,
what than I was when I was doing gig work primarily. I actually work way more, and I don't think that's a coincidence. I think it's but yes, I don't know if the hours spent working on creating acting opportunities has increased. I think it's probably stayed the same.
Yep.
Even though I'm working more hours with Artist Strategy than I was potentially working 20 hours of catering. But the difference is that I have learned some very valuable skills in running a business. Accountability, consistency, problem solving, critical thinking. I mean, I've learned marketing, just tons of stuff, providing value. I've learned so much running a business that has translated.
Are you there?
What?
Hello?
Are you serious?
Oh no, you're back. You froze for a sec.
Oh God. Okay. So I think that, and I think we should take a quick pee break before we move to the next thing because I have to pee so bad.
Okay, but I also have one more. Unless
no, yeah, but let me just say. Let me just say this. Running a business is the best thing I ever did for my acting career. It has made me a better actor. Number one, it's made me a better actor because it's less about, the frame through which I view my art has changed. It's about providing value, doing the job, being efficient, right? And I've gotten 10 times better. The other reason why it's the best thing I've ever done for my acting career is because I've learned skills that translate into generating my own opportunities as an actor. And, actually that's it. What are your 2 points?
So the 2 points that I just want to make, one of them I started to say, but it's really the most important one for me in relation to secondary income, so I just really want to underline it, what it means for me. I want complete control over my time. And by that, I simply mean when I wake up every day, we have a ton of work, as we know. But Mike, and you can attest to this. When it comes to the opportunities for you and I in our work, artist strategy, it's not that it takes a back seat and it doesn't. But if we need to move something, we move it. And I cannot have in my world business is too difficult. If I have an audition, I would say 97% of the auditions I've ever gotten in my life. Great, I'll be there. Thank you. Perfect. No problem. That's what I want. If I want to go do a gig, I want to be able to do it. I don't want to be beholden to anybody because that really worries me because I know me too. And if I have to head out the door at 9 a.m. every day, and even if I come back at 2 p.m., if I've given 5 hours of my life to something else, it's that I'm not passionate about and intentional about,
right.
It's not going to be helpful for me. The other thing I want to say that shocks me that we don't talk enough about this is that this is nothing new. Most people have secondary income streams. Most celebrities, famous people who make a lot of money. Why did Ryan Reynolds buy Mint Mobile? You think he's passionate about cell service? I think not. Celebrities have business managers a lot of times and wealth management, firms who will help them identify ways that they can continue to grow the money that they're taking in. And Sydney Sweeney, came out with this famous article, right, where she's like, "Look, I can't not take an acting job because I can't pay my bills if I don't do that."
Listen, that girl hustles too. You look at that girl's Instagram. I mean, she is hustling.
Yes.
She is hustling.
Yes. And so it all goes to say this is inevitable. I say the same thing about self-producing, by the way. You see artists do all this all the time where they reach a point in their career like, I want to do my work. I'm like, well, do it now because you can reap the benefits. But that's a conversation.
Here's another thing I'll say that might be a little dire, a little alarmist. We're on strike right now. I don't think what is going to be negotiated at the end of the day is going to make that much of a difference. We're not going back to to broadcast days. We are just not going back to broadcast days where you could where the regular person can earn $60,000 over 2 years from residuals. We are not going back to that. That's just the reason why we're not going back to that. Also, is because the yes, of course, there's greed involved, but the model is not the same. We are not going back to the good old days of living off of and you and I both, we talk about this all the time. It is more competitive than ever before. It's not less competitive, more competitive. And I think that these streamers are going to be pulling the golden age of television. Everybody's saying is over. It's done now. The golden age of television is ending because these streamers are failing. They've invested too much in content.
Well, look, Fran Drescher said the quiet part out loud when she said that only 15% or thereabouts of SAG-AFTRA members are able to qualify for health insurance because they were able to make over $26,000 a year. That means that around 85% of members are making under $26,000 a year. I mean, look, of course there are people people who do theater and TV, but think about that. No, people aren't making livable wages. So what do? What's the plan?
And I don't think the strike is going to change that dramatically.
Right. I don't think so either. Well,
because
to your point about competition, technology, there's a million reasons.
Because I think that we are going to see less. We're going to see less opportunities, not more. Because these streamers are not making money. So they're pulling back on content. So blah, blah, blah. You need secondary income streams.
Yeah. And maybe one day we'll break that down further in a further episode because I actually think secondary income streams, just in terms of like because I think for a lot of people, Mike, they agree. But I bet you most people who are going to listen to this episode, all 7 people, I bet you at least 6 of those 7 people who listen to this are going to be like, "That's a joke. You think that's funny?"
No, I laughed internally.
Mike's not laughing at my joke. No, but I think that people go, "Great. What? Okay, sounds good." So just to say, I think we can break it down further.
Yeah.
But let's talk a little bit. Let's give our listeners a little bit of some guidance, a bit as to where they could even begin to consider to build some foundational financial best practices.
Right. So the thing I would say, obviously, first thing you need is a budget, right? So the first thing you need to do is build a budget of some kind. And how do you build a budget? Well, let's first talk about why a budget's important and how we view a budget a little different, I think, than a lot of people view it. We have something that we call a standard monthly budget. And the point of a standard monthly budget is, I would say, it's a foundational tool in this respect, right? It's a rough budget that you can then craft more specific budgets off of for each month, because per the point we always make, our financial circumstances are always changing, and we're always investing in more things than others, or I'm taking a trip next week, or I know in October I'm taking a trip, and I know I start this gig at this time, or I lose this gig at this time. So our financial situation, it's always changing. We need to have a baseline numbers that we can then craft and tailor to reflect more specifically what the months look like. And I think when somebody's being a very good boy or girl or
person,
they will be building budgets 3 months in advance, ideally. I think if you can build budgets 3 months in advance, here's what October's going to look like, November, December, whatever the case may be. You can then plan. You can then go, I need to earn more money here, here, and here, right? But a standard monthly budget is basically the foundational budget that you will use to craft those more specific budgets. I think that's pretty clear.
Yeah, I think that is pretty clear. I mean, if we're trying to build a baseline of a good financial practice, we need to be working from a budget. And I would say 95% of the people who come through our doors do not work from a standard monthly budget. And I think while most people understand it, I think you're saying it, definitely awareness helps with spending, obviously. Per your point about getting ahead, it helps with even if you're setting goals along the way. It allows for better for debt management in a lot of ways. There's so many reasons why having a budget. Also, again, you could track progress. I mean, you have to have a budget. Basically, step one, you have to build some kind of budget. And how you do that, let's talk a little bit about that.
Sorry, you go.
No, I mean, it's pretty simple, right? You're going to track actuals. What'd you take in? What went out for 3 months? Because that's going to give you your median numbers, right? So it's not just like, I think I'm going to spend. No, what have you spent? So it's August, we're recording this, so that'd be, May, June, July. If I was building my budget for the last, for August, May, June, July, what were those median numbers? And those are that becomes my standard monthly budget. And I want to say, Mike, one thing about this, sorry. Especially for artists. What's really important and that we talk about is checking in with that quarterly, i.e., okay, January, February, March, I have my budget. Let me look at those median numbers again for April. Okay, April, May, June. What were those budgets and how does that affect July, August, and September? Essentially, just changing it up quarterly, because we live in, especially artists, in a world where some months will take in $2,000 and some months will take in $12,000. It's totally
Let me
different.
tell you something too. I think that this may seem like, quote, overkill, to be tracking. And we, by the way, suggest that, we'll talk more about this, but actually we'll talk about it now. But once you build those budgets, we suggest that you track every dollar you make and every dollar you spend alongside of the numbers that you projected for that month. And you do that every single week. Now, if anybody's like, this seems like overkill, if anybody out there is like, this seems like overkill, as a reminder, we are in a highly risky situation. And we're going to be spending money, if we're doing it right, investing money in our businesses, potentially, not earning as much as we would like. We need to be on this like white on rice. And the other thing I'll say is, what's been coming up for me about our work so much and is the idea of reviewing things consistently. Looking at things consistently as a touchstone. Yes, let me review those numbers for the last 3 months, and let me kind of come up with a standard monthly budget for this month. Let me, or for this quarter, that I'll then kind of slightly tweak for each one of the months. Let me look at the past 3 months, the 3 months now after this quarter, and then craft a standard monthly budget and then tweak it for each upcoming month. It's just making sure it's giving you peace of mind.
Sure.
It's making sure you know what the fuck is going on. There's less, even if, and I find that this process of once you have built these budgets quarterly and then you track weekly alongside of those projected numbers, even if it's not good, in the sense that you are making way less than you thought you were going to make, or you're spending more than you thought you were going to spend. Ooh, I already spent in these categories, whatever it may be. I've always noticed however dire it is, you feel better.
Especially if it's not good.
You feel better because you at least know where you stand.
Exactly.
And it's not a question mark. And that every time you fucking swipe that card, you don't know if it's going to go through or not. I mean, that's a shitty ass feeling. You don't know, but when it comes up on the rent time and, you're not sure if you have the money in your account to pay rent, it's like just tracking it alongside weekly is just gives you, even if it's bad. And then what starts to happen is you inherently will start to problem solve. Inherently, even if it's bad, you will start to problem solve and figure things out. Oh, I can maybe do this or cut down here or blah, 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 blah. You'll start to figure it out. But the reviewing process is so, I think with everything, with your goals, with, what projects you have, reviewing them all the time consistently is a way to keep them alive and to make sure that you're staying fresh on it and blah, 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 blah. So
one of the ways to do that, and what we encourage people to do also, is to sort of set a financial day, by the way. Just one day a week where you go in and you do these things, where you track your actuals, you're looking at these numbers. Okay, great. I have my budget. Can I do? I have a budget of $350 for food and drink out, and it's the second week, and I've spent $452. Okay. Well, what that would typically mean is you're good, girl. You're good. You're good on the food and drink out, or you're not.
Exactly.
And you're going to make the decision to better spend. I want to use this as an opportunity briefly, Mike, to talk about taxes and business expenses in relation to this too, because along with tracking your actuals, one of the things that's never made sense to me, and I'm thinking back like years ago, when I would go to do my taxes and go meet, and they'd say, great, what are our expenses, what are our deductions, and I'd be like, I don't know, and then I'd look back at all the statements, and I'm like, I don't know, what was that coffee that I spent $23 on? I don't remember. I don't know. Why do we do this? Why do we wait till the end of the year? It makes zero sense to me. If you're already tracking your actuals in real time, and look, that coffee, $23. I went out with my manager. I'm
That was a big coffee.
I
hope we got a big gulp size.
I like big coffees, and I like big. So anyway, if I'm tracking my actuals,
family friendly,
then I'm gonna track my business expenses in the same time. I promise you, this will lower your tax liability at the end of the year, because you'll have spent enough time, identifying. Am I getting really screechy? Because in my ears, my voice is like.
No,
really
you're always
tinny.
like that. Tinny. That sounds like a derogatory term for some reason.
Oh God! You tried to cancel me?
Yeah, tinny.
You would love it if I got canceled, but I don't have to deal with this fucker anymore.
No, I wouldn't love that. But I think that what's interesting about just to say this about tracking your business expenses every week, and just we go into this in depth with our clients. Even if you are not making money as an actor, you can still write off business expenses, Schedule C, and lower your tax liability 1,000%, 1,000 million, 200 billion%. So this is not just for the people who are making tons of money acting. This is or the people making just 1099 income, or 1099 income. This is for everybody who is legitimately trying to pursue, and that's the key, legitimate, because you would have to prove that to the IRS if you ever got audited, who is legitimately trying to pursue building an acting career or an acting business.
Yep.
Any business expense that goes towards that can technically be written off in Schedule C. We're not going to go into the intricacies of that, but yes, do it.
So, along with this idea of tracking your actuals every week and potentially your business expenses, we also have some ideas as to how to save strategically every single week.
Right, right. We kind of word this as like, how are you distributing your money now based on your goals? So whether that's saving, whether that, we call it goal tracking is what we call it, like in our systems and shit. But like, so what are you, personal savings, which we'll get into all of these, retirement, prepping for tax season, potentially any other goals that you have. How are you every single week distributing your money? And again, why are you doing this weekly and not monthly? Well, again, when you are doing, and by the way, when people are really struggling, like really bad financially, I'll sometimes recommend people do all of this that we're talking about daily. I'll sometimes recommend.
Not the savings, not the distributions.
Not the distributions, but the tracking, the incomes, and the all of that. I'll recommend that they do it. That they'll do it daily. But the thing is, with why do we distribute money weekly? Why do we not wait till the end of the month and then put this chunk of change here? Again, because we are able to work with it in real time. We're able to work more in real time and adjust our spending accordingly. If I wait till the end of the month to pay, my credit card off, right? I'm not, throughout the month, I'm not working with the adaptability and the flexibility as much when it comes to, seeing how that affects my spending, seeing that affects my, how I'm distributing for these other things. So what are some of these, buckets when we talk about distributing your money? What are the buckets that we're talking about here?
I mean, obviously, it's probably going to be personal, person to person, right? Everyone's going to have different considerations. But I think that top level, what we want people to at least consider is setting aside money for your creative business, working capital. So, for example, rather than, I need to get more headshots, I guess I'll just do it, and you just put it on a card, pull from savings, da-da-da-da-da. Well, like any business would, what if you eventually had a fund that you could actually go, look, there's $1,800 there for my creative business. That's what I have to work from. And again, per your point, Mike, that if we're adding to it every week, right, that would be growing. So definitely creative business for me is one of them.
I would also say personal savings, which we not to go into this in super depth, but we believe consists of two different elements. An actor's personal savings. The first half of it is a true emergency fund. So in case of emergencies, my house caves in on me, surprise
You're
bills.
arrested.
You're arrested, you want to never mind. I'm not going to get into all the gross things. But, true emergencies, unexpected expenses, true unexpected expenses, emergencies, right? But then we do believe it is nice to have a reserve that you pull from in between acting jobs. Why? Because when a job ends, the last thing you need to be doing is going back to your gig job. That's the last thing you need to be doing. You need to be, in fact, continuing to push harder and grow your business, create the next opportunity, get that secondary income, continue to grow that secondary income. Because the ideal, in my opinion, is that in between jobs, probably in the beginning, you're living off of a combination of your secondary income, I would even say unemployment, and potentially pulling some from your in-between fund, a fund that you've built up to sustain you before the next job.
Yeah, I mean, it's likely inevitable. So, like, for example, just like for framework, maybe it's you're working towards setting aside 3 months for your emergency and 3 months for an in-between fund, acting as a savings. Also, quick side note, we'll work with sometimes people who will come in who will have like $57,000 in savings.
Yeah,
well, what's it just doing this? Just sitting there. I say that because that bounces off the idea of the 3 months for emergency, 3 months for in-between fund, because once you've hit that threshold, let your money make money. Go put that money into something that can grow,
exactly.
Other investable opportunities.
Or use that to maybe grow a potential capital fund for your creative business. Or the other thing is secondary income. Like ideally you are able to grow something, and then the idea with I just want to say this so that it's clear. The idea with the creative and the secondary income funds savings that you're growing is that in the dream world, you get them up to a certain threshold, which would represent your budget or the amount you are comfortable spending in both of those areas for each month. And you're presumably, is that the word? Presumably spending money, using that money each month, spending, but then remember, all of your income, you are probably taking a percentage of your income and replenishing those funds every month. That's the idea.
Yep.
And, this is all incredibly complicated, and, buy something if you want more information. But,
well, no, but there's another two that I want people to consider, right? One is taxes. So even when people say, "Oh, I didn't owe last year, but I owed the year before," right? That's very common. In those instances,
I've never owed.
But we still think that people should, better safe than sorry, right? And so you'll hear people say, especially if you're on 1099 work, but because it's also always fluctuates. You can make a lot of money, make a little money, and you never know when, right? For next thing you know, you get that recurring guest star that pops up, and next thing you know, you made $22,000 out of the blue. You might, who knows? We tend to suggest people just set aside 7.5% as an example of
and to be clear, all their income.
Of all
their income.
Yeah, weekly.
Not just the 1090, not just the 1099 work.
Yes.
And the reason why is so that when if you do end up getting 1099 work, whether that's through unemployment, which is very common, or whatever, you are not going to have to put aside 20% of that money because you've already put aside a percentage of your W-2 work.
I'm so glad.
That's the idea.
I'm so glad you said the unemployment thing, because I never talk about that, but I never have, when I collect unemployment, I always just take the full thing. It's such little money that I never have them pull taxes. So for me personally, this is a great example as to why I should be saving, which I do, but why I would consider saving for taxes, because I never have them pull from my unemployment. I will undoubtedly owe, at the end of the year.
Yep, and if you're probably, and to be clear, if you have a secondary income, you're probably collecting that in the form of a 1099. You're probably not or whatever we use, a canine or something, feline, a dog, So you get it's just, we believe, setting a baseline that you set aside for all of your income, not just 1099 income. And the other thing is retirement, because the other thing to set aside is retirement. And the thing that we'll say, not going into immense detail about retirement, that's probably for another episode, but the recommendation is like 15% of your money. And look, that's kind of how we started this episode. That's just not realistic. It's not realistic because we are prioritizing creative and financial freedom.
Right.
And so, now look, the pressure is on to make a lot of fucking money. The pressure's on to make a lot of money now. Right. But I don't think most artists can afford to set aside 15%, because that money needs to be going to their acting careers so they can build an acting career or a secondary income business, and or that will pay them a living wage, and pay or ideally more than a living wage. Well, that's going to require money.
Well, it's funny because this is one of the points that you and I have gone back and forth on when it comes to retirement, because and it's how Mike and I always create the work, is by playing devil's advocate on both sides for many things, to understand how it relates to artists. And when we were talking about long-term planning in particular, and talking about how growing two businesses, by the way, secondary income, whatever that is, and your acting career, how those are so risky and difficult unto themselves, that the idea of being able to set aside for the long term just becomes another burden in a lot of ways. And yet, for me, right, how are you making the money that's going to go in the retirement account? Where's it coming from? Right?
And the point that this is actually how we realize creative and financial freedom is what you're prioritizing, because it's your aunt's. Well, you could be a chef.
Right.
Go do that to put the money in the account. But that's not your priority.
Exactly.
Your priority is to be creatively and financially free.
Exactly.
So, the money to put in the account, if you're prioritizing creative and financial freedom, is not coming from gig work or working for somebody else. It's coming from the money you are generating through your secondary income streams or your acting careers. And how are you going to get that work? You're going to get that work by spending money.
Exactly.
And so it's a balance. So we recommend, we won't get into details, but we recommend a percentage that is much lower most of the time than what most people, because we are considering the fact that you are going to be spending money to build something sustainable. And so how do we set aside something but not choke us, in terms of what we're setting aside? Let's continue to blow through this.
Because compound interest, of course, is the magic idea. So even if you're doing something, look at $12 this week is better than $200 2 years
5 years from now.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
So the final thing, I just want to briefly talk about debt, just briefly, because the only thing, the last point I want to make about all of this is that tell the story with the FedEx guy.
Yeah. Oh, the guy. Yeah, we realized this when we were whatchamacallit, when we were shooting the e-learning stuff. Who was that guy? What was his name? He was
something
the CEO
Smith?
of FedEx. Yeah, it's like probably Jebediah, or something. But he was a CEO of FedEx, and he had he took the money. The company was basically about to go bankrupt, and he took
$5,000 or something like that.
Less. I think it was even less than that. He took that and he went to Vegas and he gambled it all to basically, because he needed more money to continue to pay his bills, pay his workers. And so he gambled it all, and he made enough to tide him over. And if you recall, he made enough to tide him over so that he could actually get money from more people so that he could pay. So then he paid so that he was able to take their money, invest it in the business, and then eventually grew into a obviously a major, force. And the reason.
Well, I was going to say, why that idea is probably more so about risk. What it underlines is that there are going to be times when we will likely have to take on debt.
We will have to spend money we do not have to grow the thing. We will have to spend money, and if we wait till we have it, then we may be waiting forever. And, the thing is that, the Airbnb guys, too, I remember hearing years ago that they ran up credit cards, like so many credit cards. And the thing is that when you are trying to grow something, you will probably, more than likely, unless you come from money, which is fine, you will probably have to spend money that you do not have to grow something that will pay you what you want it to pay you. And spending money you don't have means borrowing money and paying down debt. And so the argument, we had a client in the Spark say something that I thought was so useful. He was talking about this, and because look, the idea of taking on debt, and we believe in paying it down incrementally week after week, but the idea is like, of course, right? The argument is like, well, the dollar you spend towards that thing, it's going to cost, you're paying back $3, right? That's so you're, in the form of interest, right? Obviously. But the idea is, if you are, I think, primarily going into debt around your business, the idea of you doing that is you're spending that $1 to pay back $3, but you made $5. Because you were using that money to invest in your business that will pay you back. So that's the point. That's why every business on the face of the planet, every business ever,
including the United States of America,
has debt.
Right.
Is because the idea is, the hope is you are going into debt because, yes, you will have to pay back more, but that you used that money to reach a critical mass and make money.
Exactly.
That's the point of going into the debt. So,
exactly.
How do you pay it? Are you tracking, as opposed to, and again, we believe in paying it down incrementally. It's okay to take on debt, but it is non-negotiable. You have to pay it down incrementally every single week. And it's okay if you take on more in between weeks, but you always have to be aggressively paying it down, to the best of your ability.
This has obviously been a long episode, but
tell me about it. Including the 30 minutes we shot where
when my microphone wasn't turned on. But it's a massive topic, obviously. That's why we said this at the top, that this is the number one reason why people fall out of the game. And it's worth, continuing to excavate. We hope what we've offered has been illuminating in some regard, and at least if you disagree with us, great. Please have your own opinions. If nothing else, just think about it. Consider what we're talking about. Period. So, thanks for being with us again. This is Creative Risk, where we talk about art, entrepreneurialism
and everything in between. No clap. But and follow us on social medias. Follow us on the social medias at artists, plural. It's dot strategy.
Artists dot strategy. Dot strategy.
Okay, so it's a dat. Oh, I don't know what
you got
doing. Dot strategy.
I was doing a voice.
Okay, fun. Follow us there. And see what
and what like and subscribe, of course.
Oh, like and subscribe to our YouTube where you're watching this. Where I watched the
1,000-Pound Sisters on TLC, and they have a YouTube channel, and they always go, like and subscribe, and they're like huge. I'm not making fun of fat people. I'm just saying.
How dare you? They're healthy. They're healthy.
Shut up. Okay.
All right.
Bye.